Welcome to Gilli Pong Analysis. Here we are, still in a deep dive into alchemy. And we are investigating our friend Lubicz, or Schwaller. He has a long name, and we are going to learn more about his name in this part 2. There's a part 1, if you missed that one. This is part 2 of the article from aaroncheek.com, Call of Fire. So we're just going to continue. Matisse, Theosophy and the Parisian Alchemical Revival. L'Académie Matisse was opened in Paris in 1901, and by 1910 Schwaller was closely tied to a woman by the name of Marthe Essig, a German-speaking élève of Matisse, who was in charge of the latter's studio. Essig became Schwaller's first wife and gave birth to Schwaller's only child, Guy. During this period, there was a liberal degree of cross-fertilization between L'Académie Matisse and Henry Bergson's lectures in philosophy at the Sorbonne. As a consequence, Schwaller was deeply informed not only by Matisse's experiment in color as a pure phenomenon, which sought to convey the life beyond the mere appearance, but also by Bergson's concept of the élan vital, the vital spark or impulse. In Matisse's studio, Schwaller learned that the physical world, the world of color, traces the invisible movements of the metaphysical world. The aim of the true artist was not to capture visible phenomena, but to convey its spiritual impulse or élan. Because, I don't know, I'm not a French speaker, but it could be élan. Because the metaphysical is unable to be perceived without this physical trace, because the physical cannot exist without its metaphysical underpinning, any strict demarcation between the two is therefore impossible. For Schwaller, metaphysical cause and physical effect were ultimately poles of one continuum. Between 1913 and 1916, Schwaller frequented the French branch of the Theosophical Society, and, in a much more clandestine manner, participated in the then-flourishing Parisian alchemical revival. In 1913, an artist, alchemist, and inventor by the name of Jean-Julien Champagne, 1877 to 1932, approached the young Alsatian in the Café Schwaller de Lubicz in Montparnasse. After Champagne made initial contact with Schwaller, a more covert meeting was arranged, during which Champagne revealed that he was in fact Fulcanelli, insisting that this double identity and Schwaller's subsequent contact with him remain an absolute secret. The two agreed to begin collaborating on alchemical matters, and before long they formed a working relationship that would span almost 20 years. The exclusive focus of this alliance was the secret technique behind the blues and reds of Chartres and the earliest Gothic cathedrals, the creation of alchemically stained glass. In Parisian alchemical circles, this endeavor was regarded as an experimentum crucis of the alchemical opus itself, tantamount to the realization of the Philosopher's Stone. So here we can see Jean-Julien Champagne, artist, alchemist, inventor, and the foremost name behind the mystery of Fulcanelli. Champagne was Schwaller's closest hermetic collaborator, and operative alchemical opus was for almost 20 years, image source Christian Dumollard. Yeah, you can see this website here. It's in this context that Schwaller's earliest research must be situated. He had been working on a hermetic reading of the Gothic cathedrals as didactic edifices, alchemical texts in stone. In 1913, he lent his unpublished notes to Champagne 13 years later, without Schwaller's permission. Champagne would publish Schwaller's idea in an elaborate and embellished form. This work, still revered in spagyric circles to this day, was Le Mystère des Cathédrales, The Mystery of Cathedrals, 1926. Here you can see a picture of it here. As you can see, illustrated, compromised by Julien Champagne. The final form of the text, which bears encrypted insights into the practical alchemical opus, can be recognized as a fluid amalgam of Schwaller's material and the alchemical symbolic of the cathedrals. Numerous symbolic digressions on the phonetic Kabbalah, adapted from the work of the deeply erudite classicist and hermetic philosopher Pierre Dujols, 1862 to 1926, and the overall synthesis and presentation of Champagne himself, who also furnished the illustrations. Despite this hermetic theft of his work, Schwaller continued to financially support Champagne, working with him on the stained glass opus right through the end of the latter's life. Beyond its stated mission, the French branch of the Theosophical Society acted on many respects as a de facto nexus for the myriad occult and esoteric currents active in Paris at the time. Through these intersecting milieux, Schwaller met many important figures from French esotericism. Some of them would become his close collaborators in the socio-political, artisanal, and initiatic work that he would undertake during the coming decade. I am sorry. I'm trying my best. Bear with me. I hope you can understand what I'm saying or reading. The Theosophical Society not only gave Schwaller a forum in which to develop his early understanding of sacred science, it also provided the ideological and social fabric from which his first foray into esoteric politics would depart. Of the French Theosophical Society, Schwaller later remarked, "I was infinitely grateful to this movement for having opened my eyes to certain aspects of Buddhism. But later, I had to follow my proper path." And in this sense, he had been compared to Rudolf Steiner, who similarly began his occult career in theosophy before departing on his own spiritual course. Steiner comments Dufour Kowalski, by knowing how to liberate himself from the theosophical grasp in order to follow his proper path, would therefore have a determining influence upon the future choices of René Schwaller. Before Schwaller could take the first steps along his proper path, however, the First World War broke out, and in 1914 he was mobilized into the French army as a stretcher bearer. Upon the recommendation of his father and some influential theosophists, however, he found a post in the army chemical service, Sarkels. Here, with some eminent chemists, he made a systematic analysis of military supplies, from canned food to the colorants of uniforms. This position not only establishes Schwaller's credentials as an accomplished chemist, More importantly, it highlights the fact that facility with the methods of rationalized science was not necessarily antithetical to the adoption of spiritually integrative empirical methodologies. The Velieurs and the name de Lubicz. In the aftermath of the war, Schwaller grouped together associates, collaborators to form Les Velieurs, the Watchers, named after the apocryphal egregoroi, who bequeathed the arts and the sciences to humankind in the Book of Enoch. The Velieurs were dedicated to the revitalization of war-torn industrialized society by preserving the qualitative role of the artisan, which Schwaller regarded as the soul of civilization. According to Schwaller, one of the aims of the Velieurs was to assist demobilized artisans in finding the opportunity to readapt to a new life guided by a sense that was mystical rather than purely economic. During this period, Schwaller published essays on Le Théosophie, or the Theosopher, and Les Affranchis, the Awakened, an organ of Les Velieurs, and produced a small monograph on Pythagorean arithmosophy entitled Études sur les nombres, a study of numbers, 1916. The Velieurs would cause controversy, seeking to reverse the gains of the French Revolution. They adopted liberty, fraternity, hierarchy as their cat's cry. Not only did their journals feature a vibrant attitude of anti-egalitarianism, such attitudes appeared alongside the kinds of anti-Semitic sentiments rife in French culture at the time. As a reaction against caprices in contemporary fashion, Schwaller and his cadre adopted a simple uniform of dark shirts, pants, and riding boots. He later confided that this inspired the Nazi Sturmabteilung uniform, which originating Nazi uniform is no more damning to Schwaller's wider oeuvre than it is to Hugo Boss's. French author Pierre Mariel has suggested that Rudolf Hess was a one-time member of the Velieurs. This alleged link between the Velieurs and the early Nazi Party has predictably led to much alarmist speculation in conspiratorial literature. However, the idea that the Velieurs were a proto-Nazi group cannot be supported with anything approaching logical fidelity. The hierarchy avowed by the Velieurs was based on a qualitative spiritual praxis, and not on a biologically conceived hierarchy of races. So they were not eugenicists. They were working on the soul, figuring out the soul somehow, or consciousness. That having been said, a detailed analysis of Schwaller's remarks on Jews during this period and throughout his life suggests that he did indeed struggle with a so-called Jewish question. He was divided. While he disdained the perceived materialism of Jewish cultural habitudes, it must be emphasized that his views on race were shaped not by biological ideologies, but by an esotericism of race-inherited form theosophy. He also regarded Judaic religious themes, especially the cosmology and anthropogony of Genesis, as integral to his esoteric philosophy. In 1943, before the end of the Second World War, Schwaller remarked, "The Jew has been persecuted horribly. This merits reparation." While in a 1950s text, he severely reprimanded himself for his earlier anti-Semitic views and affirmed an elitism based on pure altruism. But anthropogony of Genesis. This is something I'm wondering if it goes into it a little bit later here. I think I saw something, but we can just anthropogony is what's going on now? Thank you. Load. So Genesis 2:4. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth when they were created, in the day that the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. And 3:4. He drove out the man, and at the east of the Garden of Eden he placed the cherubim and a flaming sword that turned every way to guard the way to the tree of life. And these guys were so fascinated with taking the religious texts and converting them into alchemical symbology, and therefore trying to figure out the secret of life, the philosopher's stone, how to have eternal life, how to heal others, how to transmute the lead in our being into gold. And they were always looking at this stuff. But anyway, on 10th of January 1919, the Lithuanian poet Oskar Vladislas de Lubicz Miloš, 1877 to 1939, bequeathed to René Schwaller, then aged 31, the right to bear the noble title and arms of the clan Bosa Vola, Will of God, also known as de Lubicz. De Lubicz. Miloš, a noble and diplomat, was one of Schwaller's closest friends. Together the two formed the Centre Apostolique within the Veliers to give expression to an apocalyptic form of mysticism. Miloš was also one of the few people to whom Schwaller conveyed his Hermetic philosophy at the time. Reflections of which would surface in the poem Miloš dedicated to Schwaller, Le Cantique de la Connaissance, the Canticle of Gnosis. However, it was Schwaller's efforts in assisting Miloš in securing Lithuanian independence that most deeply indebted the diplomat to Schwaller. In the aftermath of the First World War, Miloš was deeply affected by the post-war plight of his fatherland. Then, in danger of being subsumed by the encroaching Bolshevik state, Schwaller assisted Miloš in devising the diplomatic strategy that successfully convinced the Allied forces to restore the country's former borders, thereby securing the continued political and cultural identity of Lithuania. In a moving ceremonial gesture, Miloš officially adopted Schwaller into the clan de Lubicz, and granted him the imprimatur to use the royal name and arms of his family. Bearing a right which belongs to my ancestors, it is a pleasure to bequeath unto my brother René Schwaller a mark of my esteem and a testimony of my love by receiving him into the clan and therefore making him a part of my family, and to confer to him the right to bear the arms entitled Lubicz, with the variant Bosa Vola, or Will of God. 16,000 feet beyond man and time. In 1922, Schwaller and his closest associates abandoned their hopes of social revolution and moved to Sovretta district above the alpine town of St. Moritz, Switzerland. Friedrich Nietzsche, who made St. Moritz his summer residence between 1881 and 1888, aptly described the region as 6,000 feet beyond man and time. Here one can live well, he said, in this strong, bright atmosphere, here where nature is amazingly wild and solemn and mysterious all at once. Here you can see a picture of Station scientifique de Suhalia, St. Moritz, Switzerland, complete with laboratory, forge, looms, printing press, and observatory. Suhalia provided the philosophical mansions of Schwaller and his entourage throughout the 1920s. Above St. Moritz, Schwaller and his entourage established the Station Scientifique de Suhalia Laboratories. Conceived as an initiatic retreat and workstation, why have I created Suhalia? He asks in a series of lectures delivered in the winter of 1926. It is not to create a center where people who desire to travel this path can find the necessary isolation. And by isolation I mean exclusion from the world of banality that reduces everything to its own level. Complete with laboratory, forge, looms, printing press, and observatory, Suhalia was a hive of artisanal, alchemical, artistic, homeopathic, and mystical activity. Schwaller published a handful of rare works here, to include an Egyptian tarot deck illustrated by his soon-to-be stepdaughter, Lucy Lamy, who could go on to furnish the elegant, geometrically exacting illustrations to Schwaller's Egyptological works. In addition to alchemical and homeopathic preparations, he is said to have invented a hydrodynamic yacht and a motor that ran on vegetable oil. View from Suhalia. What is Aor? Aor is that which one night at sunset from high atop a frozen flame red peak said to me, "Listen." Schwaller de Lubicz, L'Appel de Feu, 1926. That's one of his names, Aor. That's gonna be a reference later. The immense and transcendent beauty of St. Moritz proved inspiring not only for Nietzsche, who conceived his concept of eternal return on the shores of Lake Silva Plana, but also for Schwaller, who encountered a cold, fiery presence in the amber rose hues that bathed the mountains at sunset. Over 5 nights in the winter of 1926, from the height of a frozen flame-red peak, Schwaller received an apocalyptic revelation from a mysterious presence called Aor, a name that Schwaller would henceforth be known by among his closest associates. This revelation was published the following year as L'Appel de Feu, the Call of Fire. Although Schwaller did not indulge in the Parisian alchemist's penchant for the phonetic Kabbalah, a deep note of resonance would nevertheless have been struck for him between the name Aur, the Hebrew word for light, and the French word for gold, or, from Latin aurum. Indeed, in one text, gold is considered precisely by Schwaller as a metallic light, lumière métallique. Aur is best understood as a tutelary intelligence, a daimon in the Socratic sense, with which Schwaller communed. A demon, a daimon. Interesting. Among other things, Aor's Call of Fire exhorted Schwaller to go beyond dualistic consciousness, casting the seeds for what he would later call the intelligence of the heart. Perhaps most revealingly, Aor articulated a particular motif that would pervade Schwaller's entire alchemical metaphysics. Specifically, He used the language of light and color to express how the visible world of appearance emerges from the primordial invisible unity, just like light broken through a prism. A thing is always triple in its nature. It exists in and of itself by virtue of its appearance, but it is also caused by a complementation of two states of the same nature. You, yourself, being in principle a man, human, result from the complementation of two states of the same nature, that which affirms and that which denies, that which gives and that which receives, that which expresses and that which is impressed, i.e., that which receives the impression. This double state is your primordial spiritual androgyny, and you have recollection of this duality in unity. Can you say that white light is composed of green and red light? No, and yet when it's broken through a prism, it gives rise to two complementary colors. The white light no longer exists. The colors are a transformation of white light, a transformation that imparts different vibrations to the same substance. The differences in vibrations do not change the light, but their impressions appear differently to the eye, giving rise to diverse colors that are always complementary, two by two. Now remember, you are light, white light, and you will find your dimly remembered androgyny. You are light, but light broken through the prism of life, that is to say, through experiences and necessities. The idea that complementary duality is a transformation of primordial unity was also applied to his understanding of embodied sexuality. Now, here we go. This is the thing that Newton was so obsessed with. Androgyny, hermaphrodites, how to meld the feminine and masculine together somehow. This formed the topic of his most infamous book, Adam, l'homme rouge, Adam, the Red Man, 1926. This is the book on auction. Get out of here. Come on. So, Adam the Red Man, or the Elements of a Gnosis for the Perfect Marriage. So here, it's erotic, it's eroticism, it's sex. So they're starting to do the sex magic thing. Like in here. But the eroticism of which René Schwaller speaks opens onto the magic of the erotic, dear to Aleister Crowley, and to his phalanstery of Cephalu, this demonic stuff. Like, what is this? You see how they're going investigating God, and then they're suddenly getting trapped in this androgyny, this perversion of life, perversion of science, perversion of understanding of what is going on, A work on the conjugal mystery and the metaphysics of Eros. The extended title of the work gives a good indication of its contents. Adam, the Red Man, or the Elements of a Gnosis for Perfect Marriage. A work divided into two parts, of which the first examines the moral situation and the vital crisis created in human society by the domination of Catholicism, and the second part of which presents the fundamental notions of an occult teaching in order to enable human couple to discover a basis which is philosophical and conformed to evolution in marriage. Excuse me. The goal of which is to attain spiritual union. The Adam text would prove controversial. André Breton called it Luciferian, and Schwaller himself later claimed to have burned it. Whether he meant this literally or figuratively, editions of the 1926 work are in fact rare. Hence, the link I showed you here, this is on auction. This is something that I can't even see how much somebody paid for it. But they are very rare books because, we're talking about the creation of life. We're talking about the seed that the Creator can only create, but we generate it in our thing that we got from God, in a way, meaning semen, quick lime, living lime, according to the alchemists. So, what elicited such reactions? Schwaller interprets Judaic anthropogony, which we talked about earlier. I talked about Genesis 2:4 and 3:24, the cherubim, the flaming sword, the creation of heaven and earth, in a fashion similar to the Platonic motif of the gendered human as a divided whole. So we are man and woman, we are masculine and feminine energies combined into one, both men and women. And this is very Jungian too. Jung is always talking about that the animus is the male shadow of a female, of a woman. And then the anima is the feminine shadow of the man. But this is so close to start being Luciferian, you see? It's like you're going too far into it. This is like eating the apple of the tree of knowledge. You can go too far into these studies. That's why it's so important that we keep centered because it's so interesting. We're talking about the philosopher's stone here. His interpretations bears a pronounced Gnostic resonance, distinctly evocative of the gospel according to Philip, which wouldn't be discovered for another 30 years. And these are the Gnostic texts. The Gnostic meaning gnosis, meaning knowledge, but Gnostics, they're not all that you think is. Arians are considered kind of Gnostic because they reject the divinity of Jesus Christ. Many of the guys from Hinduism and from the Brahman sect, they believe that Buddha is like Jesus Christ in a way that he enlightened himself. So we're talking about something that is very, very interesting, but very scary too. When Eve was still in Adam, death did not exist. When she was separated from him, death came into being. If he enters again and attains his former self, death will be no more. For Schwaller, the mystical union of male and female forms, or the conjunctio, by which the complementary poles combine to dissolve their duality through the re-entry into their pre-existing unity, the primordial Adamic or Adamantine state. As to woman, she guards in herself the memory of her decline, from man into woman. She can become man only by fusing herself with him. Then the two will no longer be two, but an animated body. We see Luciferian shit. Sorry, didn't mean to curse here, but this is, this is also what is going on in the world right now. This is why everybody is inverting the rainbow and creating 6 colors of the rainbow and making it their flag. But people don't get it. This is an age-old thing. And it's extremely difficult to go into this. But I'm going to stop here. We're going to make a part 3. And so it's going to be these kind of short videos instead of having it like 1 hour long. This is now 35 minutes, and thank you so much for watching. Have the most beautiful present moment. It's time to shine. So, let's glow.
Gilli Pong.
Analyses.